Welcome to Book Summary 101, the channel where we bring you clear, simple, and practical summaries of the world's greatest books. Today's summary is from The Power of Habit, Charles Duhigg. This book explains why habits exist, how they shape our lives, and how we can change them to build success, both personally and professionally. Every day, our lives are filled with habits. From the moment we wake up, we brush our teeth, check our phones, make coffee, drive to work, and so on. Most of these actions feel automatic, almost like we are running on autopilot. But behind every habit is a structure, a system that makes it repeatable. Charles Duhigg shows us that habits are not destiny. They can be understood, shaped, and even changed when we learn how they work. The book starts with a powerful idea. Every habit follows the same pattern, which Duhigg calls the habit loop. This loop has three parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. The cue is the trigger, the signal that tells your brain to start the habit. The routine is the behavior itself, what you do. The reward is what you get at the end, the satisfaction or relief that makes your brain want to repeat the loop again in the future. For example, let's imagine someone bites their nails when they feel stressed. The cue might be the feeling of tension or nervousness. The routine is biting their nails. The reward is the sense of relief or distraction from stress. Over time, this loop becomes stronger and the habit becomes automatic. But the key insight is this: if you want to change a habit, you don't need to erase it completely. Habits never disappear from our brains. Instead, you need to replace the routine with a new one while keeping the same cue and reward. This is the golden rule of habit change. You cannot erase old habits, but you can transform them. Duhigg shares the story of a man named Eugene, who lost his memory because of a brain illness. Eugene could not remember anything new, but surprisingly, he was still able to form habits. For instance, even though he couldn't remember where his kitchen was, his body could automatically walk there and open a jar of peanuts. This showed scientists that habits are stored in a different part of the brain than memory. Habits are deeply rooted, and once formed, they can remain even if memory is gone. The author also explains why habits are so powerful in companies and societies. For example, he describes how the company Alcoa transformed itself when its CEO, Paul O'Neill, focused on just one habit: safety. At first, investors thought this was strange, but by focusing on safety, O'Neill changed how workers behaved, how managers communicated, and how processes improved. Safety became the Keystone habit, the one habit that started a chain reaction of other positive changes. The idea of keystone habits is very important. These are habits that influence many other parts of our lives. For example, exercising is a keystone habit. People who start exercising regularly often begin eating healthier, sleeping better, and becoming more productive at work. Another example is making your bed every morning. It seems small, but studies show that people who make their beds tend to feel more organized, disciplined, and even more confident during the day. Keystone habits have the power to spark transformation far beyond the single habit itself. Another powerful story from the book is about Starbucks. The company trains its employees not only in making coffee, but also in habits of willpower. For example, if a customer is rude or difficult, employees are taught to follow a routine called latte. Listen to the customer, acknowledge their complaint, take action to solve the problem, thank them, and explain what you did. By giving employees a habit to fall back on during stressful situations, Starbucks ensured consistent service and reduced stress for workers. This shows us that willpower itself can be treated like a habit. It is not just a natural talent that some people have and others don't. It can be developed by practicing routines that strengthen self-control. In one study, researchers found that people who practiced self-discipline in one area, like exercising regularly, became more disciplined in other areas too. Willpower, like a muscle, grows stronger with use. The book also looks at how companies influence consumer habits. One striking example is Procter & Gamble's marketing of Febreze. At first, Febreze was a failure. People didn't see the need for it because they were used to the smells in their homes. But then the company discovered that if they connected Febreze to an existing habit, like cleaning a room, they could make it successful. The cue was finishing the cleaning, the routine was spraying Febreze, and the reward was the fresh smell that made people feel satisfied with their work. Once this habit loop was created, Febreze became one of the company's biggest products. These stories show us a simple truth. Habits can be reshaped. Whether in our personal lives, in organizations, or in society, the habit loop gives us the tools to understand and change behavior. But understanding habits is not enough. The real challenge is applying this knowledge to our own lives. Think about your daily routines. Do you drink too much coffee, spend too much time scrolling on your phone, or procrastinate instead of working? Each of these behaviors is likely a habit loop. The key is to identify the cue, the routine, and the reward. Once you know them, you can experiment by changing the routine while keeping the same cue and reward. For example, imagine you want to stop eating junk food every afternoon. The cue might be boredom at work. The routine is walking to the vending machine and buying chips. The reward is the small burst of pleasure and break from work. If you want to change the habit, you can replace the routine. Instead of eating chips, you could go for a short walk, drink water, or chat with a colleague. The cue and reward stay the same, but the routine is different. Over time, the new habit becomes automatic. Charles Duhigg also warns us that habits are never completely gone. If you had a bad habit in the past, like smoking, it can return under stress. That's why self-awareness and willpower are important. You need to understand your triggers and stay mindful of the cues that might bring back old habits. Habits also shape not only individuals but also communities. Duhigg gives the example of the civil rights movement, where a habit of community gatherings and social connections helped spread protests. People joined because of strong social habits. They followed their friends, neighbors, and church groups. Movements grow when habits of friendship, peer pressure, and shared values take over. This shows that even large-scale social change often begins with simple, repeated habits of connection. So far, we have seen that habits are built on the loop of cue, routine, and reward. We have learned that habits can be reshaped by keeping the cue and reward, but changing the routine. We have also seen that keystone habits can spark bigger transformations. Habits affect not only individuals, but also companies and societies. This is just the beginning of our journey into the power of habit. Charles Duhigg. In the next part, we will go deeper into how habits influence success, how we can create positive new habits in our lives, and how we can use the science of habits to build a better future for ourselves and the people around us. In the previous part, we explored how habits are built through the loop of cue, routine, and reward, and how these loops shape not only individuals but also organizations and even entire societies. Now let us dive deeper into how habits work in our lives, how they connect with our emotions, and how we can use this understanding to create real change that lasts. One of the most fascinating lessons from the power of habit, Charles Duhigg, is that habits are not about motivation or willpower alone. They are about patterns. Once a pattern is set, it often runs automatically, even when we don't intend it. Think about driving a car. When you first learned, every step required attention, pressing the clutch, shifting gears, checking the mirrors. But over time, the routine became automatic. You can now drive long distances while holding a conversation or listening to music. That is the power of habits. They allow our brain to save energy by running behaviors automatically. But here is the danger. The brain doesn't know the difference between a good habit and a bad one. It just builds loops. That's why it is so easy to fall into habits like overeating, smoking, or procrastinating. The brain remembers the pattern, and the loop keeps running until something breaks it. To understand how habits form and change, researchers studied people with addictions. For example, in one study, they found that people who struggled with alcoholism were not only responding to the physical desire for alcohol, but also to the habit loops connected with drinking. There was usually a cue, like stress after work, followed by the routine of drinking and the reward of relaxation or escape. The habit was not just about the alcohol, but about the pattern itself. This is why programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, work. They don't erase the cue or the craving for reward, but they replace the routine. Instead of drinking, people are encouraged to attend a meeting, share stories, and connect with others. The cue is still stress. The reward is still relief and connection, but the routine is different. By changing the middle of the loop, the habit can be transformed. But Duhigg explains that belief is also important. People are more successful in changing habits when they believe that change is possible. This belief often comes from community support. In AA meetings, for example, members often say, "Keep coming back." The presence of others who have succeeded gives hope and belief to new members. This shows us that changing habits is not only about the brain, but also about the social environment. Belief also explains why some people manage to stick with habits during stressful times while others relapse. Stress often triggers old routines. But when people have strong belief systems, whether through faith, family, or community, they are more likely to hold on to new habits. Belief acts as a shield that protects the habit loop from collapsing during tough moments. Now let us look at another area where habits play a major role: our daily productivity. Many of us struggle with procrastination or lack of focus. The book shows that productivity is often a matter of managing habits. For example, some of the world's most effective companies like Google, Apple, or Toyota have created cultures built on productive habits. One striking story in the book is about how companies like Target use habits to predict consumer behavior. Target's marketing team studied shopping patterns and discovered that major life changes, like pregnancy or moving to a new home, create opportunities to form new habits. For example, a woman who becomes pregnant will start buying new products, like unscented lotion or vitamin supplements. By tracking these small changes, Target could predict who was pregnant and send them coupons before they even announced it. This shows that habits leave a fingerprint in our choices, and companies can use this knowledge to influence us. But what does this mean for us as individuals? It means that we can take advantage of life changes to build better habits. Research shows that when we move to a new home, start a new job, or go through a big change, our old habits are disrupted and our brain becomes more open to creating new routines. This is the perfect moment to establish positive patterns like exercising, reading, or healthier eating. Another important lesson from the book is the role of small wins. Big goals can feel overwhelming, but small wins create momentum. When you achieve something simple like making your bed or drinking enough water in the morning, your brain feels rewarded. That reward encourages you to continue the behavior and even apply it to other areas. This is why keystone habits, like exercise or daily planning, are so effective. They create a series of small wins that grow into big transformations. Let us take the example of exercise. Many people struggle to stick with it because they think of it as a huge commitment. But if you focus on small wins, like exercising for just 10 minutes a day, you build the habit without pressure. The cue could be putting on your sneakers after work. The routine is a short workout, and the reward is the feeling of accomplishment. Over time, this habit grows. Soon, the 10 minutes may turn into 20, and the routine becomes part of your identity. Speaking of identity, one of the most powerful ways to change habits is to connect them with who we believe we are. If you see yourself as a healthy person, you will be more likely to eat well and exercise. If you see yourself as a writer, you will naturally sit down to write more often. Habits shape identity, and identity reinforces habits. Duhigg explains that when habits become part of how we define ourselves, they are much harder to break. The book also explores how organizations can use habits to build success. One example comes from the US military. They discovered that when soldiers had strong habits for reacting to danger, they performed better in combat. By training routines repeatedly, soldiers could respond without hesitation, even under stress. These habits saved lives because they replaced fear and confusion with automatic action. In business, habits can determine whether a company succeeds or fails. For example, the book describes how Tony Dungy, a football coach, transformed his team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, by focusing on habits. Instead of teaching complicated strategies, he taught his players simple routines they could use automatically during games. By practicing these routines again and again, the players developed habits that allowed them to act quickly under pressure. Over time, this approach turned a struggling team into champions. These stories show us that habits are not just personal. They are part of systems, organizations, and cultures. And when leaders understand this, they can shape the habits of groups to create success. But let us not forget that habits can also be dangerous when they are destructive. In another example, Duhigg describes how a tragic fire in a London Underground station in the 1980s revealed the deadly effects of bad organizational habits. Workers ignored small fires and warnings because of routines that discouraged responsibility. This disaster showed that when bad habits become part of a culture, they can cause massive harm. This brings us to a key idea: awareness. If we want to take control of our lives, we must first become aware of our habits. Most of the time, we act without thinking. We grab our phone when we are bored. We snack when we are stressed. We stay up late watching videos. These actions feel normal because they are habits. But once we step back and look at the loop, cue, routine, reward, we gain the power to change. So how can we start? The first step is to identify a habit you want to change. Write down the cue, the routine, and the reward. For example, suppose you want to stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. The cue might be a notification sound or a moment of boredom. The routine is picking up the phone and scrolling. The reward is entertainment or distraction. Now you can experiment. You might turn off notifications or replace scrolling with reading a few pages of a book. The goal is not to erase the habit, but to reshape it. The second step is to start small. Don't try to change everything at once. Pick one habit and focus on it. Success in one area builds confidence for the next. Remember, habits are like dominoes. When one falls, it can knock over many others. The third step is to use cues and rewards wisely. If you want to build a new habit, link it to a strong cue. For example, if you want to start meditating, choose a specific time and place, like right after waking up or before bed. Give yourself a reward, even a small one, to make the loop satisfying. The brain needs rewards to remember habits. And finally, surround yourself with supportive people. Habits spread in social networks. If your friends exercise, you are more likely to exercise. If your colleagues are hardworking, you are more likely to be productive. By joining communities that encourage positive habits, you increase your chances of success. This shows us that habits are not only about discipline or effort, they are about design. If we design our environment, our routines, and our social circles in the right way, habits can work for us instead of against us. In this part, we have explored how belief, community, small wins, identity, and environment all play a role in shaping habits. We have seen examples from companies, sports teams, and even entire societies. The lesson is clear. Habits can control us if we ignore them, but we can control them if we understand them. In the next and final part, we will bring everything together. We will look at how to build lasting habits, how to avoid falling back into old patterns, and how the science of habits can help us achieve success and happiness in the long run. In the first two parts, we explored the science of habits, the loop of cue routine reward, the golden rule of habit change, the idea of keystone habits, and the role of belief, community, and identity in shaping our lives. Now, in this final part of the power of habit, Charles Duhigg, let us bring all these lessons together and see how we can use them to create lasting transformation, both personally and collectively. One of the most important ideas to remember is that habits never disappear completely. They remain stored in our brain, ready to be triggered by cues even after years of disuse. That is why people who quit smoking or drinking often relapse under stress. Old routines lie dormant, waiting for the right trigger. But this is not a reason to despair. It is a reason to be prepared. Knowing that habits are permanent gives us the wisdom to stay mindful. We may not be able to erase old patterns, but we can build stronger ones that replace them. To make habits stick, Duhigg emphasizes the importance of planning for obstacles. For example, if you want to develop the habit of running every morning, it is not enough to simply say, "I will run tomorrow." Life is full of challenges, rainy days, busy schedules, low motivation. The most successful habit builders prepare for these challenges. They lay out their running shoes the night before. They plan a backup time if they miss the morning, and they remind themselves of the reward, like feeling energized or proud. By planning for setbacks, they turn excuses into manageable problems. Another insight is the role of automation. The more automatic a habit becomes, the less effort it requires. Think of brushing your teeth. Most of us do it without thinking because it is deeply ingrained. That is the level we should aim for when building positive habits. How do we get there? Through repetition and consistency. Research shows that habits take time to form, usually between 30 to 60 days, depending on complexity. The key is not perfection, but persistence. Missing one day does not ruin the habit. What matters is getting back on track quickly. Let us take an example. Imagine you want to build the habit of writing every day. At first, it may feel difficult. You may stare at a blank page. But if you commit to writing just 10 minutes daily at the same time and place, it becomes easier. Over time, your brain starts to expect it. The cue might be sitting at your desk in the morning, the routine is writing, and the reward is the satisfaction of progress. Eventually, you no longer need to force yourself. Writing becomes part of your identity. I am a writer. Now, let us talk about willpower, one of the most powerful habits of all. Duhigg calls willpower the single most important keystone habit for individual success. Studies show that people with strong willpower achieve better grades, earn more, and live healthier lives. But willpower is not something we are born with in fixed amounts. It can be trained like a muscle. In one study, people who practice small acts of discipline, like keeping a food diary or avoiding sweets for a short time, developed greater willpower in other areas of life as well. The act of exercising self-control in one area strengthened their overall discipline. However, just like a muscle, willpower can also become tired. If we rely on willpower alone without building supportive habits, we are more likely to fail. That is why smart people design their environments to reduce the need for constant willpower. For example, if you want to avoid junk food, it is easier to not keep it in your house than to resist temptation every time you see it. This shows us that success is not only about having strong character, but also about designing systems that make good habits easier and bad habits harder. Change the environment, and you change the habit. Another fascinating part of the book is how movements in society grow from habits. The civil rights movement in America is a prime example. Rosa Parks' act of defiance, refusing to give up her seat on a bus, was powerful. But it was not the only reason the movement spread. It spread because it tapped into existing social habits. Churches, communities, and friendship networks created a chain reaction. People joined not only out of principle, but because their friends, neighbors, and peers joined. Habits of social connection turned an isolated protest into a national movement. This teaches us that habits do not just belong to individuals. They belong to groups. When we gather, our shared routines and customs shape our behavior. Companies, schools, and even nations are built on collective habits. Changing these requires leaders who can recognize patterns and replace them with better ones. But let us return to the personal level. How do we apply all of this to our own lives? Here is a practical process inspired by the book. First, identify the routine. Choose one habit you want to change or build. Observe yourself carefully. What is the behavior you repeat? Is it procrastination, snacking, checking your phone, or something else? Write it down clearly. Second, experiment with rewards. The reward is not always obvious. Suppose you snack every afternoon. Is the reward really the food, or is it the break from work? Or maybe the chance to chat with a colleague? Try different replacements. Instead of chips, try taking a short walk. See if you feel the same satisfaction. If yes, then you know the real reward was the break, not the food. Third, isolate the cue. Cues often fall into categories: time of day, emotional state, location, other people, or an immediately preceding action. For example, maybe you check your phone every time you feel anxious. That means the cue is an emotion, not boredom. Once you know the cue, you can plan your response. Finally, plan a new routine. With the same cue and reward, insert a healthier routine. Stick with it until it feels natural. This is the golden rule of habit change. Keep the cue and reward, change the routine. It is also useful to track your progress. Keep a habit journal. Write down when you succeed and when you struggle. Over time, patterns will appear. Maybe you skip exercise on busy Mondays. Maybe you snack more when you are tired. Awareness helps you plan better. Now, let us consider the power of Keystone habits again, because they deserve special attention. Keystone habits are not just any routines. They are the ones that spark a chain reaction. For example, exercising regularly often leads people to eat healthier, sleep better, and even spend money more wisely. Families who eat dinner together tend to have children who do better in school. Keystone habits create a ripple effect far beyond the habit itself. One way to discover your keystone habits is to ask, what is the one habit that, if I changed it, would make everything else easier? For some people, it is waking up early. For others, it is keeping a daily planner. For many, it is exercise. Find your keystone and focus on it first. The book also shows how habits connect with identity and values. Habits are not just actions, they are statements about who we are. Every time you act in a certain way, you reinforce an identity. When you say, I am someone who never misses a workout, or I am someone who always keeps promises, you make the habit stronger. Conversely, when you break habits, you weaken that identity. That is why consistency is more powerful than intensity. It is better to exercise for 10 minutes daily than for 2 hours once a month. Small, consistent actions build strong identities. Finally, Duhigg reminds us that habits are a gift. They allow us to do amazing things without constant effort. Without habits, daily life would be exhausting. Imagine if you had to consciously think about how to tie your shoes, brush your teeth, or drive your car every single time. Habits free our minds to focus on bigger challenges. The key is to take control of which habits we let into our lives. As we reach the end of this summary, let us review the main lessons. Habits are formed through a loop of cue, routine, and reward. To change a habit, keep the same cue and reward but replace the routine. Habits never disappear, but they can be reshaped. Keystone habits spark chain reactions that transform other parts of life. Belief, community, and identity are essential for lasting habit change. Willpower is like a muscle. It can be strengthened but also exhausted. Small wins create momentum for bigger success. Habits shape not only individuals but also organizations and societies. By understanding habits, we can design our lives with purpose instead of running on autopilot. Thank you for listening to this summary of The Power of Habit. Charles Duhigg. If you found it valuable, please subscribe to Book Summary 101 and press the bell icon so you never miss our future summaries. This channel is made for book lovers who want to keep learning and growing every day. And before you go, tell us in the comments, which book would you like us to summarize next? Your suggestions will help us bring you the content you want most.